Now, from the most trusted names in local news, KDPG Sunday Edition.
Good morning, happy Easter, happy Passover, and welcome to the KDPG Sunday Edition. I'm Stacy Smith. On this Easter Sunday, it would seem as if religion has moved from the back pages to the front pages. From differences with the government over health care mandates to religious freedom acts, and from armed confrontations between different faiths to a pope that has brought a different light to the Roman Catholic Church. We will discuss some of those topics this morning with our guest, the Most Reverend David Zubik, the Bishop of the Diocese of Pittsburgh. David Schrimman, the editor of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, joins us for this morning's discussion. Thank you so much for being with us once again, Your Excellency. It's great to have you here on this Easter Sunday.
Great to be with you, Stacy. Happy Easter. David, good to be with you, and blessed Passover.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, it is Passover, it is Easter, it is spring. It's a time of renewal, it's a time of hope, and it's a time for a reflection also at this time. So let's reflect on the state of the church as it stands right now from your viewpoint.
Well, from my perspective, and that's always dangerous because I've got some skin in the game here. I think that what's happening, first of all, in the Diocese of Pittsburgh is really exciting. We just finished a major campaign that went way over what we had thought it would do. And I think principally because the focus of the campaign, by and large, on the diocese side of it was, how can we be more church? How can we really do the things that we need to do for the people that we serve and beyond? But I think it's also a good time in terms of our relationships with other Christian denominations. You know, Christian Associates continues to do good work and to be able to speak out in one voice on a number of issues. And it's a wonderful time also for relationships between the church and our Jewish community. We have such wonderful friendships with the various Jewish congregations in the area.
Now, your campaign was a monetary campaign. It was entitled The Church Alive.
Right.
What did that necessarily mean?
Well, the campaign for the Church Alive, we were trying to really prepare for the future and to be able to do some of the things that parishes couldn't do based on their usual collections, and also things that the diocese wanted to do that we wouldn't be able to do based on our regular collections. And I think we had 17 buckets for the diocese, and we focused on a number of things like training lay leaders and taking a look at ongoing formation for priests and doing endowment funds for students who want to go to Catholic schools, and reaching out to provide services to elderly people, and all of those kinds of things that I think that will in fact help us continue to grow and to be alive with our folks. I think that that's been pretty much the theme over the last 8 years, is the church alive. And I think while you did indicate that the campaign was focused on money, to be honest with you, Stacy, that wasn't the main object. The main object was trying to get as many people involved in the work of the church, trying to get more and more lay people involved in the church. The monetary part of it was a second phase of it. And I think we succeeded on both fronts. People were very generous to the campaign, but we had lots of people who came out of the woodwork and said, I'd like to be able to be involved in the church more than I have in the past. And that's really been encouraging, for sure.
With the success of this of this campaign and the continued prominence of you and the church in our community, what has been the effect of the new Pope, still the new Pope, I suppose, on the way Catholics think of themselves and of their church?
Well, the impact has been phenomenal. I've had a chance to meet Pope Francis 5 times already, and he is, what you see is what you get. And I think especially what's exciting is, as we take a look at what the Pope just announced a couple of weeks ago, that we're going to have a Holy Year for Mercy beginning on December the 8th. Boy, that's really calling us to really take a look at the gospel and say we've got to be very serious about what Jesus did for all of us, and that we've got to live that out in our own lives. You know, I think lots of times people look at mercy as being something that, you know, that's something that somebody else has to do. But I think this is the Pope is really calling all of us to be able to make some ground in terms of being forgiving and being kind and being open to each other. One of the things that we just recently announced is that in the Catholic Church we have a very important annulment process, for people whose first marriages may not have worked out, and based on our own beliefs, before a person can enter into a marriage in the church, they have to go through an annulment. And the usual cost for an annulment process is usually about $2,000. And while we as the diocese subsidized a good portion of it, there was also a portion of that fee that was asked from the people who would apply for it. Well, this past week we decided that we're not going to ask for any funds coming from the people who apply, and that we've been trying to do that over the course of the last probably the last couple of years. But because of the success of the campaign, and also because the Pope in November said, you got to look for ways in which a process like an annulment cannot be a burden for people, but we could try to make it as easy as we can. And so we announced that this past week, and I think the response has been good.
And Bishop, you are only the second diocese, I believe, to have done so.
Actually, there's just a couple others. In Rochester, right. New York, Cleveland has done it as well, so I think we may be the third.
The third. And so can we look for the diocese here to be at the vanguard of other movements reflecting the...
I hope so. I think one of the things now we're doing, because we can't just rest on our laurels on the campaign. One of the things that we're beginning to do, and as a matter of fact, we're going to be announcing the full effect of it this coming week with our priests on Thursday, and then with all the parishes next Sunday, is what we're calling On Mission for the Church Alive. And this is going to be a planning process of how do we grow the church, and how do we take a look at the challenges we're going to be faced in the future and meet them head on, but meet them head on in a very positive kind of way. And I think what we've been trying to do over the course of the last 8 years is help people to get used to what it means to be working not in separate silos. We have 200 parishes. We can't be working as 200 separate parishes. We've got to see the ways in which we really work together to really prepare for the future, how we can become better servants one to another. So you'll be hearing more about that as the weeks and months go on.
Okay, you've opened up a lot of different topics here.
Okay.
Let me go back to one on the annulments that you announced this past week.
Sure.
Just so there's no misunderstanding, this is not stating that getting allowing a divorce within the church is going to be any less burdensome. Well, I shouldn't say less burdensome, any easier than it was before. I mean, monetarily, it might be easier for people to be able to now go through the process, but you're not changing any rules or regulations.
Well, we don't have the power to do that. However, that Pope Francis has called for a synod on the family that's going to take place in October this year in Rome. And one of the things that he's asked the bishops and cardinals who are delegates to the synod is to say, is there a way we can streamline the annulment process to make it less burdensome for people? Right now in the Diocese of Pittsburgh, it takes 9 to 10 months once the process has begun. And I think the fact of it is that, for some people, the fee question was difficult because perhaps they couldn't afford it. We've always given people breaks on it. But I think for other people, it was a matter of principle. And I think maybe because they didn't understand that the money simply went to cover the cost of 15 canon lawyers and the secretarial staff. But I think what the Pope's calling for is to say, is there a way that we can do this, maintain our principles on it all, but is there a way we can do this that's more pastoral? Isn't
the bottom line, in a way, to make sure that you can keep those who still believe in the Catholic Church, but as you say, marriage just didn't work out,
right,
to keep the in the church and receiving sacraments?
Right, that when they're entering a second marriage,
right,
that they would be able to do so. And that's what an annulment process allows for. Yeah. And I think that was one of my biggest hopes as we took this first step, is that people who maybe resisted, walked away from the church, will kind of take a look at this again and say, we really want to help you out, and this is one of the ways to improve it.
There are times that the church was not necessarily really accepting of some people either. I mean, during this process. Maybe not in this diocese, but I know in cases in other dioceses as well.
And that has to all be rooted out, because if we're going to be true to our job that Jesus has given to us, we've got to look for ways to reach out to other people and help them, and at the same time maintain our principles.
All right, now the other thing that you brought up with David here, and this is what you're going to be announcing this coming week with the priests, and then next Sunday from the pulpit. Delve in this a little bit more, if you can. Tell us exactly what you're looking to do.
Well, I think there are lots of ways in which we can do what we need to do as church and not duplicate efforts. And I think that there has been, in the past, this belief that somehow, well, every parish has to do exactly the same thing and provide for the particular needs, even though there might be a parish 2 miles away and they're doing the very same thing. And I think that we're coming into a time when, our resources are not what they used to be. We're going to have a significantly smaller number of priests to work with. Obviously, we have financial resources become a little bit more limited in what we would call our river towns. Those were the places where the church really grew before, when the steel mills were going at full speed. Now we know that where the church's growth is not on the river towns, but on the highways. And so I think it's a matter of taking a look at making sure that the church is present in every single part of our 6-county area, but that we do what we do wiser, and that we look to think outside the box to provide some leadership that maybe we're going to just get used to in a new way.
I'm just curious, sociologically, Bishop Zubik, how the highway church parishes are different from the river ones.
Probably in many ways.
Socioeconomically.
Well, I think certainly, much younger. When you take a look at what's happening up in Cranberry and Adams Township and Mars, and that section of the North Hills area, or what's beginning to happen down near South Point, you're looking at young professionals, so that I think they're in a higher economic bracket, but the numbers are a lot larger. I think the median age of St. John and Paul Parish, which is up in the North Hills, is under 30, which is significant. I suspect it was that way back in the early part of the 20th century in the river towns, when people were working hard in the mills. But I think what we're trying to really be able to do is to say the church is important in every place. And so one of the things that we're looking at, we're having an increasing number of deacons who are being ordained for the church. And one of the things we're going to be doing later this summer, I'm going to be appointing 4 deacons to a new role in our diocese, which is deacon administrators. And what that is going to do is to help our priests really focus on the spiritual part of their job. That's when some of our guys have said, we're getting tired. It's tough for some of us to handle 2, 3, 4 parishes. Is there a way you can help us? And the deacon administrators is one of the ways in which we'll be able to move in that direction.
I want to delve a little bit more into that in just a moment when the KDPG Sunday edition continues. Welcome back to the KDPG Sunday edition. Our guest on this Easter Sunday is the Most Reverend David Zubik, the Bishop of the Diocese of Pittsburgh. And Bishop, we were just discussing with you some revelations you're going to make this coming week as far as how you're going to approach the church, and perhaps maybe the best way to phrase this from what I'm listening to at times is limited resources. And one of the limited resources that you're finding you're dealing with now are the number of priests that you have. Before we get into how your deacons are going to help, where do you stand with if I can call it this way, priests in the pipeline to come through?
Yeah, our numbers continue to increase there. But I think we have to put that within the backdrop of people like me who came from the baby boomers. Right. And the fact of it is, when I was in the seminary back in the late 1960s, we had 100 seminarians there. Now, what we have are 35. And I think that that's reflective of what's happening, I think, in our society. Why we have to plan so carefully is that the baby boomers are now coming up to retirement age. And we want to make sure that we're going to have the
which means a number of priests are going to be retiring as well.
That's right. And I think the thing is, what our guys have said to me, is there a way that you can make this tantalizing so that I can stay on beyond retirement age? And I'd be happy to do it, as long as I don't have to worry about the administrative part of it.
But there's no mandatory retirement in the church, is there?
Well, yeah, you did. The priests have to submit their request for retirement at 75. That's determined by canon law. Right. And in our diocese, we also have an optional retirement age of 70. So if guys want to request retirement age at 70.
But you can take the equivalent that you have, say, in the courts of senior status.
Oh, sure. Yeah, yes. We do have senior priests in that. But at 75, a priest does have to submit his resignation, just as bishops have to do as well, too.
So what you're saying is that a number of these priests, who are the baby boomers who are reaching 70 or 75, are saying that, I still want to be a priest. I still want to do the jobs that a priest does, but I don't want to be saddled with the administrative parts of running a parish. Is that what you're...
Exactly right. In some cases, guys who retire still help. They'll put out their services to help in parishes where they're in need. But in other cases, and we have several, with a perfect example where guys way beyond 75 wants to continue to remain as pastor of a parish, but says, I really want to have somebody else who's going to do the headache work, the administrative work.
So the deacons now that you're talking about bringing in, you have 4 now. Is that?
We're going to try that as a pilot to see how it all works. We have 100 deacons, as a matter of fact, now.
But you're talking about 4 that are.
We're going to try it out to see how it works in several parishes this coming summer.
They would do the administrative.
They would do the administrative. The pastor's still responsible, even though the deacon's going to do the administrative work. The pastor still bears the responsibility. But the day-to-day attention is going to be given by the deacon.
Should we take anything that you've said, especially in the previous segment, that you're going to be consolidating any parishes?
I think it's too soon to say what's going to happen there. What we are going to say is we're going to be consolidating energy, collaborating energy, people coming together to work together. Because one of the things that I don't want lost in our conversation here is that the church has to be present in every single aspect of our diocese of the 6 counties, and that's what we're determined to do here. And I'm putting this within the context of growing the church, and we're looking for ways in which that can happen.
Now, I believe you run the 2nd or 3rd or 4th biggest school system in the Commonwealth. How's enrollment? What's the future look like there?
Enrollment is probably steady, if in some areas growing. But I'm glad you asked that question, David, because one of the things that is happening, and we've already have 4 or 5 models in our diocese, it's becoming way too big of a burden for a single parish to host a single school. And so now we're taking a look at a collaborative model. We call them consortium models. What you have in that process is that you may have, in one instance, we have 6 parishes that are involved in it, in another we have 8. All of the pastors become part of the governing board. They all chip in terms of the running of the school. And in those instances, what we found is that the population of the school begins to increase. And so,
as a result, you believe?
As a result, well, I think it is, as a result of all that. And I think that what we see happening in those models, and we've tried to do those as pilots, that's the same kind of thing I want to see happening with cooperation among our parishes. You know, I know just last weekend, you know, when we were taking a look at one particular parish in Greene County, and it looked as though we might have had to close the church building and close the parish. When we started to take a look at some of the recommendations that were coming from the people and from the whole area in that part of Greene County, I was able happily to make the announcement to the people where your church isn't closing, and that it's going to be able to stay open, and that in early May we're going to be talking about another form of ministry in those parishes in Greene County where they're going to need to work together. So I think what we found as we're thinking outside the blocks on all of these things are what ways in which we can listen to the people. And I really need the lay people to be involved in all of these things. This isn't just a clergy matter. But how can we get people to really work together to make sure the church is far more vibrant than it ever has been in the past, so that we can speak about the church growing?
David brought up before and asked about Pope Francis. Early on, right after he was named the pontiff that we have right now, there was, and the early statements that he made, there was this wide acceptance of this pope, more so than any other pope that I can remember immediately, except for maybe John the 23rd, and maybe John Paul II after he started getting into his papacy. Has that declined some? Have you seen the enthusiasm from people outside of the Roman Catholic Church decline any about the Pope now?
Oh, as a matter of fact, the opposite. I think it's increased. I mean, you know, whenever I'm shopping at Giant Eagle or pumping gas, you know, up in Green Tree, people will come and say, you know what, I'm not Catholic, but I like your new Pope, you know, and I think he's really doing a terrific job.
Why do you think that is?
Because he talks the language we understand in 2 ways. First of all, literally. You know, several years ago when he made the statement, he said, you know, you priests better know the smell of the sheep. You better know what your people are going through in their lives if you want to be a good pastor. But I think the second thing is that I think he speaks the language, for example, of mercy. That's not judgmental, but is there to do what a shepherd is to do for the sheep, to be there, to take care of them. And I think that's something that catches people's attention because, you know, I think we do a pretty good job of beating ourselves up, all of us, for mistakes that we've made. And the interesting thing about Pope Francis is he recounts a specific moment in his life, September 21st, 1953. 16-year-old kid goes to the sacrament of confession, and came out and said that changed his life forever. He experienced God's mercy there, and that has motivated him since. And I think that, you know, all of us need to be able to take a look for those moments, but we who are leaders in the church have to provide those moments. And I think that's one of the things that Pope Francis is uncovering for all of us, how we have to do that and do it together, but especially do it together as the leaders of the church.
I don't want to dwell on this, I'm sorry. But,
well, I was going to say Pope Francis has done an exceptional job in welcoming back to the church people who, on their own or from the church's initiative, had wandered from the flock. And do you see that continuing here in Pittsburgh?
Absolutely, so as well too. I think that's what we're calling the new evangelization. You know, reaching out to people who, for one reason or another, have misunderstood us, have left the church, reaching out to people who are curious about us to see if they want to become part of our church, and at the same time, the people who have been, you know, are faithful, to get them even more involved in the church, to get them more excited about their faith.
Given all of that, and I don't want to dwell on this too long, but other popes have visited this country before. There always have been throngs of people to see them. Pope Francis is coming to Philadelphia in September.
And Washington and New York, too.
I think that's his only error, Philadelphia over Pittsburgh.
That could be true. What do you expect?
I think it's going to be a tremendous outpouring of hunger and thirst for his message. You know, I guess I can't wait to hear what he's going to have to say in the joint session of Congress. I can't wait to hear what he's going to have to say to the United Nations when he speaks to them. And I can't wait to hear what he's going to have to say to the rest of us when he speaks in Philadelphia about the importance of the family.
John Paul's first trip here, John Paul II's first trip here,
1979.
changed many lives, including my own. I covered that. It was a signal moment in the life of the church and of even people who were not members of the church.
And I think this is going to be even more profound because, you know, one of the things about Pope Francis is he's not going to be held back from jumping out of the car that he's in to be shaking people's hands, especially to pay attention to persons with disabilities or to pay attention to little babies. I've seen that every time I've gone to Rome since he's been elected. You know, he comes out an hour before the audience on Wednesday, so he can do that. And the crowds have just increased immensely, but it's because he wants to be close to the people. That's his role as a pastor, and I think people know that, and they know he is what he is. He's sincere.
We don't have a lot of time left, maybe around 2 minutes or so, so I would be remiss if we didn't get into this aspect also. Where do things stand with the Diocese of Pittsburgh, Catholic Charities, and the mandate for health care?
Yeah, as you well know, it's been reported in the papers that the government appealed the decision that was made on a local level here. I went to the Third Circuit Court of Appeals in Philadelphia, and we lost that. And so what we've already decided to do now is to ask that the case be heard with the entire court. It was just heard by 3 judges. Now we're asking that it be heard by the entire Third Circuit Court of Appeals, and we'll see what the result is of that. All I want to be able to say about it, you know, it is not, as people have tried to frame it, it's not an issue about contraception, it's not an issue about pro-abortion medications. It is about religious freedom. And I think we're going to use every avenue that we can in our legal system to be able to get a fair hearing, and I hope a victory statement, because it not only affects us, it affects every organized religion.
It's kind of difficult because so many federal judges around the country have heard these cases, and we've had varying different opinions on this through the whole thing.
Right.
So if you are denied by the full appellate court, will you press on to the Supreme Court?
We're going to go take every avenue we can to be able to get to have our case heard.
Right. Bishop David Zubik, thank you so much for being with us this morning on the KDPG Sunday edition.
Thank you very much, and again, happy Easter, blessed Passover. Thanks.
Thank you. David and I will be back with some final thoughts in just a moment. David, it's always good to have the bishop on with us.
You know, you hear the phrase, sometimes what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Let's hope that what happens in Pittsburgh doesn't stay in Pittsburgh, because Bishop Zubik used the word blessed, and we are blessed here in Pittsburgh to have a clergy of all denominations who work together, who respect each other, who work for the common good, whether priest, rabbi, imam, and we're very, very lucky to have that here, and we are indeed blessed at this blessed time of the year.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we're grateful to them all.
All right. Well, thank you, and thank you for joining us. We hope that you can join us again next Sunday morning at 11:30 for the KDPG Sunday edition. For David Trimment, I'm Stacy Smith. Have a blessed Easter and a happy Passover.